She was 17 years old when they buried her alive. Not in dirt, not in a coffin, but in silence, in secrets, in the kind of small-town conspiracy that makes you question everything you thought you knew about the people who smile at you in church, who wave at you from their porches, who tell you they're praying for your family. My name is Noelle Russo, and in the winter of 1983, I disappeared from Hollow Creek, Pennsylvania. The newspapers said I ran away. The police said I was troubled. My own mother said I was dead to her long before they ever declared me legally gone. But here's the truth they never printed, the truth that's been locked inside my chest for 40 years, the truth I'm finally ready to tell you. I didn't run away. I was erased. And the people who erased me, they're still out there. Some of them are still alive. Some of them are pillars of this community. Some of them have grandchildren now, families, reputations built on foundations of bone and betrayal. Before I go any further, I need you to understand something. What you're about to hear isn't just my story. It's a mirror. It's going to show you things about loyalty, about survival, about the monsters that wear human faces and the angels that sometimes wear the faces of those we've been taught to fear. If this story makes you feel something, if it makes you question something, if it makes you remember someone you once failed or someone who once failed you, I need you to share it. Not for me, for the other Noelles out there, the ones who are still buried, the ones who are still waiting to be found. Subscribe to this channel, because this story isn't over. It will never be over until someone listens. Now, let me take you back. Hollow Creek in 1983 was the kind of town that looked like a postcard but felt like a trap. Population of 6,000 souls. Give or take the ones too broken to count. We had one high school, 2 churches, 3 bars, and enough secrets to fill a cemetery. My father, Vincent Russo, was a mechanic. Good with his hands, bad with his words. He came home smelling like motor oil and regret, and most nights he didn't come home at all. My mother, Diane, was beautiful once. I've seen the photographs. But by the time I was old enough to remember her face clearly, the beauty had hardened into something else. Something sharp. Something that cut you when you got too close. I had one brother. Anthony. Tony, we called him. He was 4 years older than me. And he was the only person in that house who ever made me feel like I deserved to exist. Tony had this way of looking at me like I mattered. Like my thoughts were worth hearing. Like my dreams were worth protecting. He'd sneak into my room at night when our parents were fighting, which was most nights, and he'd tell me stories. Stories about faraway places, about people who escaped, about lives that were bigger and brighter than anything Hollow Creek could offer. "We're gonna get out of here, Ellie," he'd whisper. That was his name for me. Ellie, I'm gonna save up enough money, and we're gonna go somewhere they've never even heard of the Russo name. Somewhere clean, somewhere new. I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. But Tony had his own demons. By the time I was 15 and he was 19, he'd gotten mixed up with the wrong people. There was a group of men in Hollow Creek who operated in the shadows. Men who ran things that never showed up in the town ledger. Gambling, loan sharking, things I was too young to fully understand, but old enough to fear. The man who ran it all was named Leonard Marsh. On paper, he was the owner of Marsh Manufacturing, the town's largest employer. He sat on the city council. He donated to the churches. He sponsored the Little League team. But everyone knew what Leonard Marsh really was. A snake in a 3-piece suit. A man who collected debts the way other men collected stamps, and who never forgot a slight, never forgave a weakness. Tony owed Leonard Marsh money. A lot of money. I didn't know how much until the night Tony came home with blood on his shirt and terror in his eyes. He grabbed me by the shoulders, and I remember the way his fingers dug into my skin, not to hurt me, but because he was shaking so badly, he couldn't control himself. "Listen to me, Ellie. Listen to me carefully. Whatever happens, whatever they tell you, you stay quiet. You understand? You don't know anything. You didn't see anything. You stay invisible until I fix this." "Fix what?" I asked. "Tony, what did you do?" But he never answered. He just held me for a long moment, longer than he ever had before, and then he walked out the door. That was November 3rd, 1983. I never saw my brother again. 3 days later, they found his car at the bottom of Miller's Ravine. The official report said he'd been drinking, lost control on the icy road. Tragic accident. Case closed. But I knew Tony. He never drank and drove. Not once. Not ever. He'd seen what alcohol did to our father, and he'd sworn on everything holy that he would never become that man. The funeral was small. Closed casket. My mother wouldn't look at me. My father didn't come at all. And Leonard Marsh? Leonard Marsh sat in the third pew, wearing a black suit and a face full of practiced sympathy. He even approached me afterward, took my hand in both of his, and said, "If there's anything you need, Noelle, anything at all, you come to me." I looked into his eyes, and I saw it. The satisfaction, the warning. In that moment, standing in the shadow of my brother's grave, I made a decision that would define the rest of my life. I was going to destroy Leonard Marsh. I was going to make him pay for what he did to Tony. And I was going to burn his entire empire to the ground, even if I had to burn myself along with it. I just didn't know yet what that decision would cost me. I didn't know that Leonard Marsh had already seen the fire in my eyes. I didn't know that he was already planning what to do about a 17-year-old girl who knew too much and looked too long. I didn't know that in 6 weeks, I would disappear from Hollow Creek, Pennsylvania, and that for the next 4 decades, everyone would believe I was either dead or a liar. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, you need to understand how a girl becomes a ghost. First, you need to meet the people who would help bury me, and the one person who would eventually help me rise. Her name was Madeline Shaw, and she was the closest thing I'd ever had to a best friend. We'd known each other since the 3rd grade, back when she was just a skinny girl with pigtails and a gap-toothed smile who shared her lunch with me when I forgot mine. Over the years, that friendship had deepened into something that felt unbreakable. Madeline knew all my secrets. She knew about the bruises my mother left when she'd had too much wine. She knew about the nights I spent crying into my pillow, wondering why I'd been born into a family that seemed to hate the very air I breathed. And after Tony died, Madeline was the only one who let me grieve. "Something's wrong," I told her one afternoon, about 2 weeks after the funeral. We were sitting in her bedroom, the one with the lavender walls and the posters of Duran Duran, and I was trying to put into words the feeling that had been eating me alive. "Tony didn't crash that car. He was murdered, Maddie. I know it." She looked at me with those big brown eyes, and I saw something flicker across her face. Something that, at the time, I mistook for concern. "Noelle, honey, I know you're hurting, but you can't go around saying things like that. People will think you're, what, crazy? Like my mother says." "No, that's not what Leonard Marsh did it. I don't have proof yet, but I'm going to get it. Tony owed him money, and Leonard doesn't let debts go unpaid. You know what people say about him." Madeline's face went pale. Actually pale, like the blood had drained right out of her. "Noelle, you need to stop. You need to stop right now. You don't understand what you're dealing with." "I understand perfectly. I understand that my brother is dead and everyone in this town is pretending it was an accident because they're all too afraid to. They're afraid for a reason." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw real fear in her eyes. "Leonard Marsh is not someone you cross. Not ever. My father works for him, Noelle. Half this town works for him. If you start making accusations, if you start digging around in things you don't understand, you're going to get yourself hurt. Or worse." I should have listened to her. Looking back, I can see all the warning signs I missed, all the moments where the universe was trying to tell me to stop, to run, to save myself while I still could. But grief makes you stupid. Grief makes you brave in all the wrong ways. "I don't care," I said. "I don't care if it's dangerous. Tony was the only person in my family who ever loved me, and I'm not going to let the man who killed him walk around this town like some kind of saint." Madeline was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached out and took my hand. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay. If you're going to do this, you're not going to do it alone. What do you need?" What I needed was access. Leonard Marsh kept his real business separate from Marsh Manufacturing. Everyone knew that. But no one knew where, no one knew how. The man was careful, meticulous. He hadn't survived this long by leaving evidence lying around. But I had an idea. There was a boy named Daniel Marsh, Leonard's son. He was a senior at our high school, a year older than me, and he was everything his father wasn't, at least on the surface. Where Leonard was cold and calculating, Daniel was warm and careless. Where Leonard commanded fear, Daniel inspired something else entirely. Every girl in Hollow Creek High was in love with Daniel Marsh. He had that kind of effortless charm, that golden boy glow that made teachers forgive his absences and coaches overlook his attitude. He drove a red Corvette, wore a leather jacket like he'd just stepped out of a movie, and smiled like he had absolutely no idea how the world really worked. But I saw something else when I looked at Daniel. I saw opportunity. You want to get close to Leonard Marsh? I said to Madeline. Start with his son. She stared at me. Daniel Marsh? Noelle, that's insane. He doesn't even know you exist. She was wrong about that, as it turned out. But she was right about the insane part. Getting Daniel's attention wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. I started showing up at places I knew he'd be. The diner after football games. The parking lot behind the gymnasium where he and his friends smoked cigarettes and talked about cars. I made myself visible without being obvious. Available without being desperate. And then one day, he noticed. You're Russo's sister, aren't you? I was standing at my locker, pretending to look for a textbook I didn't need, when his voice came from behind me. I turned, and there he was. Daniel Marsh, in all his dangerous glory. Up close, he was even more beautiful than I'd expected. Dark hair, blue eyes, a jaw that could have been carved from marble. But beauty means nothing when you've learned to see the ugliness underneath. I was Russo's sister, I said, keeping my voice steady. Now I'm just Noelle. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or interest. I'm sorry about what happened to him. He was all right. For a guy who owed my dad money. The casualness of it made my blood run cold. He said it like it was nothing. Like owing his father money was a minor inconvenience. Like the word owed didn't carry the weight of a body at the bottom of a ravine. Yeah, I said. He was all right. Daniel leaned against the locker next to mine, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive. Something that probably cost more than my mother's weekly grocery budget. You look like you could use a friend, Noelle Russo. How about I take you for a drive after school? Show you what a real car feels like. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to say no. To walk away. To find another way, any other way. But I looked into Daniel Marsh's blue eyes, and I saw my brother's face. I saw the blood on Tony's shirt. I saw Leonard Marsh sitting in that church pew, pretending to mourn. Sure, I said. I'd like that. Now, I need to pause here and ask you something. Have you ever done something you knew was dangerous because you loved someone too much to let them go unavenged? Have you ever walked into the lion's den with your eyes wide open, knowing you might not walk out again? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. Because what I did next, the choice I made in that moment, it changed everything. And I need to know if you understand why I made it. That first drive with Daniel Marsh lasted 3 hours. He took me up to the overlook above Miller's Ravine. The same ravine where they found my brother's car, and I stared down at the jagged rocks and tried to keep my face neutral while he talked about his life, his dreams, his suffocating father. He thinks he controls everything, Daniel said, exhaling a cloud of cigarette smoke into the cold air. This town, these people, me. But he's wrong. One day I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to go somewhere he can't touch me. It was such a strange thing to hear. The Prince of Hollow Creek, trapped in his own castle. For a moment, just a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered what his father had done. And I smiled. And I moved closer. And I began the slow, dangerous work of becoming someone Daniel Marsh thought he could trust. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for Daniel to start confiding in me. 3 weeks of carefully measured attention, of listening to his complaints about his father's expectations, of pretending I understood what it was like to have too much money and not enough freedom. We weren't dating, not officially, but we were something. Something that the whole school noticed, something that made Madeline nervous every time I talked about it. You're playing with fire, she warned me. Leonard Marsh is going to find out. And when he does, I'll have what I need. And what exactly is that? I wasn't sure yet, but I knew it was coming. Daniel talked too much when he was comfortable, and he was getting more comfortable with me every day. He told me about his father's business meetings, about the men who came to the house late at night, about the ledger his father kept locked in his study. What kind of ledger? I asked one evening, keeping my voice casual. Daniel shrugged. I don't know exactly. Names, numbers. He guards it like it's the Holy Grail. I tried to look at it once when I was a kid, and he trailed off, his jaw tightening. Let's just say I learned not to touch his things. A ledger. Names and numbers. Proof. If I could get my hands on that ledger, I could expose Leonard Marsh for everything he was. I could show the world what really happened to my brother. I could burn his empire to the ground. But getting into Leonard Marsh's study was going to require more than just dating his son. It was going to require access, trust, an invitation. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. My dad's throwing his annual Christmas party, Daniel told me one afternoon. We were parked behind the old textile mill, the one that had closed down when Marsh Manufacturing moved into town. It's this big, stupid thing where all the important people come and pretend to like each other. I have to be there, obviously. But I was thinking, maybe you could come with me. My heart started pounding, but I kept my face still. Your father would be okay with that? My father doesn't get to decide who I spend time with. There was something defiant in his voice, something almost vulnerable. Besides, he's always telling me I need to be more social. Bring a nice girl from a good family. He laughed bitterly. You're as nice as anyone else in this town. I didn't correct him. I didn't tell him that I was the furthest thing from nice he could possibly imagine. I just smiled and said yes. The Marsh Estate was everything I expected and nothing like I could have prepared for. It sat at the end of a long private road, surrounded by acres of pristine snow-covered grounds. The house itself was a monument to excess, a sprawling Victorian manor that had been in the Marsh family for 3 generations. When we pulled up to the entrance, valets in crisp uniforms opened our doors and took Daniel's keys. Women in fur coats and men in tailored suits streamed past us, laughing too loudly and clutching glasses of champagne. Welcome to the circus, Daniel muttered, taking my arm. Inside, the house was even more overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, a Christmas tree that must have been 20 feet tall, dripping with gold ornaments and white lights. An orchestra played in the corner of the ballroom, and servers in black ties circulated with trays of food I couldn't even name. And everywhere, the feeling of being watched. I saw Leonard Marsh before he saw me. He was standing near the fireplace, holding court with a group of men in expensive suits. He looked exactly as he had at Tony's funeral. Polished, controlled, predatory. When his eyes finally landed on me, I felt the weight of his gaze like a physical force. He said something to the men around him, then excused himself and made his way toward us. Daniel, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I see you've brought a guest. This is Noelle Russo, Dad. She goes to my school. Leonard Marsh extended his hand to me. His grip was firm, cold, exactly what I expected. Russo. Any relation to Vincent Russo? The mechanic. He's my father. Oh. Something shifted in his eyes. And your brother was Anthony. Such a tragedy. What happened to him? Such a waste. I held his gaze. I didn't flinch. Yes, it was. For a long moment, we stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills. I knew he was testing me, reading me, trying to figure out what I was doing there. And I knew that everything depended on not giving him anything to find. Well, Leonard said finally, releasing my hand. Enjoy the party, Miss Russo. Daniel, I'll expect you in my study at 11. We have business to discuss. He walked away, and I felt myself start to breathe again. What was that about? I asked, keeping my voice light. Daniel rolled his eyes. Who knows? He probably wants to lecture me about representing the family. Come on, let's get a drink. But I wasn't thinking about drinks. I was thinking about the study. 11 o'clock. Business to discuss. The ledger had to be there. The next 2 hours passed in a blur. I smiled at people I didn't know. I made small talk about school and the weather and the beautiful decorations. I kept one eye on Daniel and one eye on the grandfather clock in the corner of the ballroom. At 10:45, I excused myself to use the restroom. I didn't go to the restroom. Instead, I slipped through a side door and into the quiet darkness of the house's east wing. The sounds of the party faded behind me as I moved through shadowy hallways lined with oil paintings and antique furniture. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew what I was looking for. A study, a ledger, the truth. I found it on the second floor. A heavy oak door, slightly ajar, with light spilling out from inside. I pressed myself against the wall and listened. Can't keep covering for him, Leonard. The boy is a liability. My son is my concern, not yours. He's bringing attention we don't need. That Russo girl, for instance. You know who she is. You know what her brother was involved in. I'm well aware of who she is. Then why is she in your house? There was a pause. When Leonard spoke again, his voice was ice. Because it's better to keep your enemies close. And because if that girl knows anything at all about what happened to her brother, I want to know about it before she has a chance to cause problems. My blood ran cold. He knew. He'd known all along why I was there. And instead of pushing me away, he'd let me in. I was the mouse, and I had walked directly into the trap. I started to back away from the door, but my heel caught on the carpet. I stumbled, and my hand slapped against the wall to catch myself. Inside the study, the voices went silent. What was that? I didn't wait to find out. I turned and ran, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. I took corners at random, praying I was heading back toward the party, back toward safety, back toward any chance of escape. I burst through a door and found myself in a small sitting room, face to face with Madeline Shaw. She was wearing a server's uniform. She was holding a tray of champagne glasses, and she was staring at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Guilt, fear, and something else. Something like apology. Maddie, I gasped. What are you? I'm sorry, Noelle, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I didn't have a choice. The door behind me opened, and Leonard Marsh's voice sliced through the darkness like a blade. There you are, Miss Russo. I believe we have some things to discuss. The room they took me to was in the basement. Cold, gray, windowless. The kind of room designed for conversations that never made it into police reports. Leonard Marsh sat across from me in a leather chair, looking for all the world like we were having a pleasant chat over tea. Two of his men stood by the door, faces blank, hands folded. Professional. Practiced. Madeline was gone. They'd taken her away the moment we reached the basement stairs, and I didn't know if that meant she was safe or if it meant I would never see her again. You have quite a bit of nerve, Miss Russo, Leonard said, crossing his legs. Coming into my home. Getting close to my son. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? I said nothing. My throat was too tight, my heart beating too fast. I was 17 years old, and I was going to die in the basement of a monster's house, and no one would ever know what happened to me. Your brother thought he was clever too, Leonard continued. He thought he could play both sides. Work for me, skim off the top, and I wouldn't find out. But I always find out, Noelle. That's something you should have learned before you started this little game. Tony was paying you back, I said, my voice cracking. He was doing everything you asked. Tony was stealing from me. Tony was talking to people he shouldn't have been talking to. And Tony was becoming a liability. Leonard leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. Do you know what I do with liabilities? I felt the tears coming, hot and unwanted, but I refused to let them fall. You killed him. I solved a problem. Just like I'm going to solve the problem of you. This was it. This was the end. Everything I'd done, everything I'd risked, and it was all going to end in this gray room with these gray men and this gray-hearted monster. But then Leonard Marsh did something I didn't expect. He smiled. However, he said, you've shown me something tonight. You've shown me that you're resourceful, determined, willing to do whatever it takes to get what you want. Those are valuable qualities, Miss Russo. Rare qualities. What are you talking about? I'm offering you a choice. Door number 1. You disappear. Right now. Tonight. I have people who specialize in making problems go away, and trust me when I tell you that no one will come looking. Your mother certainly won't. Your father is too drunk to remember your face. As far as Hollow Creek is concerned, you'll be just another troubled girl who ran away from home. I felt sick. He was right. About all of it. Door number 2. Leonard continued. You work for me. I'll take care of you, Noelle. I'll give you money, protection, a future. All you have to do is forget about your brother. Forget about revenge. And become something useful. I stared at him. You want me to work for the man who murdered my brother? I want you to survive. That's more than most people in your position can hope for. It would have been so easy to say yes. To surrender. To let the grief and the exhaustion and the hopelessness win. Part of me wanted to. Part of me was so tired of fighting, so tired of being alone, that the idea of just giving up felt like relief. But then I thought of Tony. I thought of his hand on my shoulder, his voice in my ear, his promise that we would escape together. And I thought of something else. Something he told me once, late at night, when our parents were fighting downstairs. The people who try to break you, Ellie, they're counting on you staying broken. The only way to beat them is to keep getting back up. Even when it hurts. Even when you want to quit. You get back up, and you keep fighting, and eventually they'll run out of ways to knock you down. I looked Leonard Marsh in the eye. Door number 3, I said. You let me go, and I never stop coming for you. I will find a way to destroy you. I will make sure the world knows exactly what you are. And I will never, ever work for you. For a moment, there was silence. Then Leonard Marsh laughed. I admire your spirit, Miss Russo. I really do. He stood up, straightening his jacket. Unfortunately, there is no door number 3. He nodded to his men. Make her disappear. They put a bag over my head. I can still feel it sometimes, even now, 40 years later. The rough fabric against my skin, the darkness pressing in, the terror of not knowing where they were taking me or what they were going to do when we got there. We drove for what felt like hours. The car twisted and turned, and I lost all sense of direction. At some point, the road became rough, unpaved. We were leaving Hollow Creek. We were going somewhere no one would find me. When the car finally stopped, they pulled me out and marched me through the cold. I could hear trees, wind, the crunch of snow beneath my feet. We were in the woods somewhere, deep in the woods. They pushed me to my knees. I heard the click of a gun being cocked. And then, incredibly, impossibly, I heard another voice. That's enough. The bag was ripped off my head. I blinked in the sudden light, snow stinging my eyes, and tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Daniel Marsh was standing 10 feet away, pointing a rifle at his father's men. Daniel, I gasped. Get up, Noelle. We need to move. Now. I scrambled to my feet, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. The men were frozen, uncertain. They'd been given orders to kill me, but no one had told them what to do if the boss's son showed up with a weapon. Your father is going to hear about this, one of them said. I'm counting on it. Daniel grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the trees. Let's go. We ran. I don't know how long we ran through those woods. Hours, maybe. The cold bit into my skin, and my lungs burned with every breath. But Daniel knew where he was going. He led me through the darkness with a certainty that told me this wasn't the first time he'd used these paths to escape. Finally, we reached a cabin. Small, remote, hidden so deep in the forest that you could walk right past it and never know it was there. Inside, Daniel said. Quickly, the cabin was sparse but warm. There was a fire burning in the hearth, supplies stacked in the corner, a bed that had clearly been used recently. Someone had been living here, hiding here. What is this place? I asked. It was my grandfather's hunting cabin. My father doesn't know about it. He thinks it burned down years ago. Daniel moved around the room, checking windows, securing locks. You'll be safe here. For now. Why? The question exploded out of me. Why did you do that? Your father is going to. My father is going to do what he always does. Lie. Manipulate. Destroy anyone who gets in his way. Daniel turned to face me, and for the first time, I saw the mask slip. Underneath was something raw. Something broken. I know what he did to your brother, Noelle. I've always known. I just didn't think there was anything I could do about it. Not until you showed up. I don't understand. You showed me that it was possible to fight back. That someone could look my father in the eye and refuse to bend. He sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. I've been under his thumb my entire life. Doing what he says. Being who he wants me to be. Too afraid to step out of line. But watching you, these past few weeks, you're the bravest person I've ever met. I almost laughed. Brave? I walked right into his trap. I nearly got myself killed. But you didn't give up. Even when he offered you a way out, you didn't take it. That's not nothing, Noelle. That's everything. I sank down onto the floor, the weight of the night finally crushing me. Tony was dead. Madeline had betrayed me. I was a fugitive, hiding in a cabin in the woods with the son of the man who had tried to kill me. And somehow, impossibly, I was still alive. What happens now? I asked. Daniel was quiet for a moment. Then he stood up and walked to a trunk in the corner of the room. He opened it and pulled out a familiar object. A ledger. Black leather. Gold embossing on the spine. Now, he said, we burn my father's empire to the ground. The ledger was everything I'd hoped for and more. Names. Dates. Amounts. A complete record of every illegal transaction Leonard Marsh had conducted over the past 15 years. Gambling operations. Loan sharking. Bribery of public officials. And buried in the middle, a single entry that made my blood run cold. November 3rd, 1983. A. Russo. Final payment. My brother's name. My brother's death. Written in Leonard Marsh's own hand like a business expense. This is enough to put him away for life, I said, my hands trembling as I turned the pages. How did you get this? I've been copying pages for months, Daniel admitted. Sneaking into his study late at night, taking photographs, reconstructing everything from memory. He doesn't know. He thinks I'm too stupid to care about his business. Why? Why would you do this? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because 3 years ago, my mother tried to leave him. She was going to take me with her, start a new life somewhere far away from his reach. But he found out. He always finds out. He swallowed hard. She had an accident. A car accident. Just like your brother. And I knew. I always knew. But I was too afraid to do anything about it. I stared at him. The golden boy of Hollow Creek, heir to a fortune, and underneath it all, just another victim of Leonard Marsh's cruelty. I'm sorry, I said. I didn't know. No one knows. That's how he operates. Everyone's too scared to talk, and the ones who aren't scared are dead. Daniel looked at me, and I saw something new in his eyes. Determination. But not anymore. We're going to expose him, Noelle. We're going to make sure everyone knows what he really is. How? If we go to the police here, he'll just pay them off. He owns this town, which is why we're not going to the police here. Daniel smiled grimly. I have a contact in Philadelphia, a federal prosecutor who's been trying to build a case against my father for years. She just needs evidence. And now we have it. We planned through the night and into the next morning. Daniel would get a message to his contact. I would stay hidden in the cabin until it was safe to come out. We would coordinate our testimony. We would bring Leonard Marsh to justice. It seemed almost too simple. Too clean. Like we were forgetting something important. We were. The next evening, someone knocked on the cabin door. Daniel grabbed his rifle. I pressed myself against the wall, barely breathing. It's me, said a voice I recognized. It's Madeline. She stood in the doorway, shaking from the cold, tears streaming down her face. Before you say anything, Madeline gasped. Please let me explain. Please. Daniel raised his rifle. Give me one reason why I shouldn't put a bullet in you right now. Because I can help you. I can get you into your father's house. The real ledger, the original, it's in a safe behind the painting in his bedroom. The copies won't be enough for a conviction. You need the original. Why should we trust you? I asked, my voice cold. You sold me out. You were working for him. I didn't have a choice. Madeline's voice cracked. He has my father, Noelle. He threatened to kill him if I didn't report back on everything you were doing. I thought I was protecting my family. I thought. She broke down, sobbing into her hands. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to throw her out into the snow and never look back. But I looked at her, really looked, and I saw myself. A girl trapped in impossible circumstances, making impossible choices, trying to survive in a world that wanted to crush her. How do we know this isn't another trap? Daniel asked. You don't. But I'm here, aren't I? I came to you. If I was still working for your father, why would I tell you about the safe? Why would I risk coming here at all? It was a gamble. The biggest gamble of my life. I looked at Daniel. He looked at me. She comes with us, I said. But if she's lying, I'll kill her myself. Madeline nodded, wiping her face. Fair enough. We planned the infiltration for 2 nights later. The night of New Year's Eve, when Leonard would be hosting another party and the house would be full of distractions. Daniel knew the security routines. Madeline knew the servants' passages. I knew how to be invisible. Together, we might actually pull this off. Together, we might actually win. But I should have remembered what Hollow Creek had taught me about hoping for happy endings. New Year's Eve arrived with a blizzard. Perfect cover for what we were about to do. The three of us approached the Marsh Estate from the woods, dressed in dark clothes, faces hidden, hearts pounding. Madeline led us through a basement entrance that the servants used for deliveries. From there, we slipped up the back stairs, moving like shadows through the chaos of the party below. The bedroom was on the third floor. Empty, thank God. The painting, a portrait of Leonard's father, hung above the fireplace. Behind it, just as Madeline had promised, was a wall safe with a combination lock. "Do you know the combination?" I whispered to Daniel. "My mother's birthday," he said. "He thinks he's sentimental." The safe clicked open, and there it was. The original ledger, exactly where Madeline said it would be. I reached for it, and the lights came on. Leonard Marsh was standing in the doorway. Behind him, 6 men with guns. "Did you really think I wouldn't know about this?" he said, his voice like ice. "Did you really think my own son could betray me without consequence?" "Dad," Daniel started. "Don't." Leonard's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Don't call me that. You stopped being my son the moment you chose this nobody over your family." I stepped forward, putting myself between Leonard and Daniel. "This is over. We have the evidence. Even if you kill us now, there are copies. There are people who know. You can't bury this." "Can't I?" Leonard smiled. "You underestimate how far my reach extends, Miss Russo. There is no one in this state, in this region, who would dare move against me. Your federal prosecutor? She works for me now. Your copies? Already destroyed. You have nothing." My heart sank. It had all been for nothing. Every risk, every sacrifice, every moment of hope, gone. But then Madeline stepped forward. "He's lying," she said quietly. "I gave copies to someone else. Someone he doesn't own. Someone who's probably reading them right now." Leonard's face went white. "What did you say?" "My father isn't just his accountant," Madeline continued, her voice growing stronger. "He's been documenting everything for years, waiting for the right moment, waiting for someone brave enough to act." She looked at me. "When you refused to give up, even when he threatened to kill you, my father knew the time had come. He contacted the FBI directly. They're on their way here right now." Leonard Marsh looked, for the first time, genuinely afraid. "You're bluffing." "Am I?" Madeline smiled. "Listen." In the distance, through the howling of the blizzard, we could hear them. Sirens. Dozens of them. Leonard turned to run, but Daniel was faster. He grabbed his father, twisted his arm behind his back, and forced him to his knees. "It's over, Dad. It's finally over." The trial lasted 3 months. I testified. Daniel testified. Madeline testified. Her father, released from Leonard's control, provided documentation that filled in every gap. The ledger, the original, was entered into evidence, along with dozens of witnesses who finally felt safe enough to speak. Leonard Marsh was convicted on 47 counts, including conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering, bribery, and fraud. He was sentenced to 4 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. On the day of his sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse and watched them lead him away in chains. He looked at me as they passed, and for one moment, his mask slipped completely. I saw the hate in his eyes, the burning fury of a man who had finally met someone he couldn't break. I smiled at him. "That's for Tony," I said. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. It took years to rebuild my life. The nightmares didn't stop overnight. The scars, both visible and invisible, didn't fade easily. But I had something I'd never had before. I had family. Daniel and I didn't end up together. Too much history, too much trauma, too many ghosts between us. But we stayed friends. He used his share of the Marsh fortune to start a foundation for victims of organized crime, and I was proud to serve on its board. Madeline and I rebuilt our friendship slowly, one honest conversation at a time. She never fully forgave herself for what she'd done under duress, but I forgave her. Sometimes survival means making choices you're not proud of. The measure of a person isn't whether they fall. It's whether they find the courage to stand back up. As for me, I became a prosecutor. I spent 35 years putting men like Leonard Marsh behind bars. I never forgot what happened in the winter of 1983. I never forgot what it felt like to be buried alive. But I also never forgot what it felt like to dig myself out. I'm 76 years old now. My hair is gray, my hands shake a little, and there are days when the memories threaten to swallow me whole. But I'm still here, still fighting, still telling my story to anyone who will listen. Because here's what I've learned. The truth that keeps me going even when the darkness closes in. You cannot destroy someone who refuses to stay buried. They tried to silence me. They tried to erase me. They tried to write me out of history like I was nothing more than a footnote, a cautionary tale, a ghost story to scare other girls into submission. But I am not a footnote. I am not a ghost. I am Noelle Russo. And in 1983, I learned how to rise. If my story meant something to you, if it made you remember your own fight, your own survival, your own refusal to give up, share it. Share it with someone who needs to hear that it's possible to come back from the worst thing that ever happened to you. Subscribe to this channel because there are more stories like mine, more voices that have been silenced for too long, more truths that deserve to be told. And remember this, no matter how deep they try to bury you, no matter how dark the earth becomes, there is always a way back to the light. You just have to keep digging.